after the state of Illinois changed the invasive species name to crappie. The state's Department of Natural Resources says they just finished up a record-breaking harvest of what was known as the Asian carp.
6 decades ago, American farmers believed they had found the perfect solution to a growing water crisis. They imported a fish from China that could clean polluted ponds, eat dangerous algae, and cost almost nothing to feed. Today, that same fish rules 90% of the water in some American rivers, and the country that originally raised it has turned the exact same species into a $200 billion industry. The silver explosion. On the Illinois River, fishing boats no longer move through calm water. The moment an engine starts, the surface breaks open and thousands of silver carp launch into the air in every direction. Fish slam into windshields, railings, and sometimes straight into the driver. Boaters have been hospitalized with broken noses, fractured jaws, and concussions from flying carp. A woman in Illinois lost several teeth after a 20-pound silver carp hit her in the face at full speed. These scenes are not rare anymore. They happen every single day across thousands of kilometers of American rivers, and the jumping is not even the worst part of the story. Scientists have now confirmed that in many stretches of the Illinois and Mississippi rivers, Asian carp make up between 80 and 90% of all the fish in the water. These fish eat plankton, which is the base of the entire freshwater food chain. When the plankton disappears, young native fish lose their food, larger fish lose their prey, and water birds lose their meals. The collapse moves fast, and it moves in every direction at once. Since 2009, the United States has spent more than $600 million on one single goal. That goal is to stop these fish from moving a few hundred meters closer to the Great Lakes, where a $7 billion fishing industry is still alive. Commercial fishermen who spent their whole lives on these waters now pull up nets filled with almost nothing but carp, and families that lived on sport fishing have watched their income fall apart in less than a decade. Here is the part that surprises almost every American who learns it. The same fish destroying the Mississippi is the foundation of a $200 billion industry on the other side of the world. China produces close to 20 million tons of carp every year. One country cannot get rid of them. Another country built its food supply on them, and the reason these fish ended up in American rivers in the first place has nothing to do with accident or nature. Somebody in the 1960s signed the paperwork. Somebody loaded live Chinese fish onto planes and shipped them into the American South, and that person believed he was saving the country. The perfect solution that wasn't. To understand how this invasion began, the story has to move back to the years just after World War II. American agriculture was expanding at a speed that the world had never seen before. Between 1960 and 1980, nitrogen fertilizer use across the United States increased almost 6 times over. Livestock farms grew larger every year. Cities dumped more wastewater into lakes and rivers than any generation before them, and nobody in government had a serious plan to clean it up. All of that phosphorus and nitrogen had to go somewhere. It ended up in the water. Lake Erie turned thick and green. Oxygen levels dropped so low that fish died by the millions along the shoreline. By the late 1960s, newspapers across the country were calling it the Dead Lake. In the same years, Ohio's Cuyahoga River caught fire because the surface was covered in oil and chemical waste, which tells you how bad the water had become during that period. The crisis moved south next. In Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama, catfish farmers were watching their ponds choke under thick green algae blooms. In some seasons, production dropped by 30 to 50%, and losses climbed into tens of millions of dollars every year. Farmers were losing entire harvests in a matter of weeks. Something had to change, and it had to change soon. Fisheries engineers started looking for a natural cleaner that could handle the algae without chemicals. They found one across the Pacific Ocean. Between 1963 and the early 1970s, thousands of silver carp, bighead carp, and grass carp were imported into the United States from Asia. These species could eat plankton equal to 40% of their body weight in a single day. They cleared algae. They cleaned ponds. They looked like a miracle solution from the first week they were introduced. For the first 10 years, everything worked the way the engineers had promised. Catfish ponds stabilized. Water quality improved across the southern states. Research papers praised the decision, and government agencies started recommending the fish to more and more farmers. The carp were doing their job inside the fences where they belonged. And then nature delivered a blow that nobody in the industry had prepared for. The Great Escape. 3 floods changed the future of the American river system. The first came in 1973, the second in 1982, and the third was a monster that nobody forgets. In 1993, the Great Flood of the Mississippi Basin caused around $15 billion in damage. Thousands of square kilometers of farmland were drowned. Levees broke open. Research facilities flooded. Wastewater treatment plants spilled over. And every single catfish pond holding Asian carp ruptured at once. Millions of silver carp, bighead carp, and grass carp poured into the wild in one flood season. The Mississippi was not just any river for them to enter. It was a biological paradise. The river system stretches more than 3,700 kilometers and connects to 250 major tributaries. The water was full of plankton, and there was almost no predator large enough to control an adult carp. What happened next was not growth. It was an explosion. A single female carp can produce between 300,000 and over 1 million eggs every season. Native species started disappearing within a few years. Paddlefish, which had lived in these waters for millions of years, began losing their food supply. Big-mouth buffalo populations dropped in stretch after stretch. Gizzard shad, which native sport fish depend on, became scarce in areas where carp took over. Along parts of the Illinois River, invasive carp now account for close to 90% of the total fish biomass, which means the ecosystem has been almost completely rewritten from the bottom up. Fishermen who had worked these waters for 30 and 40 years started pulling up nets full of only Asian carp. Families that lived on sport fishing saw their income collapse. Tourism boats cut back on runs because the flying carp were injuring passengers. One river guide in Illinois said the day he realized his life had changed was the day he watched a carp jump straight through a child's cooler on the back of his boat. And still, even with all of this damage, the Mississippi was never the real target. The carp were always moving in one direction, and the place they were heading toward was far larger, far more valuable, and far more fragile. The Electric Wall. North of Chicago, 5 lakes hold around 20% of all the fresh surface water on the planet. The Great Lakes support a fishing industry worth about $7 billion a year and feed millions of people across the United States and Canada. If Asian carp reach Lake Michigan, scientists agree that the damage could be almost impossible to undo. That is why the United States built a defense system in the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal that looks more like military infrastructure than anything a wildlife agency would normally operate. The first line of defense is an underwater electric barrier. Steel electrodes sit about 6 meters below the canal bottom and fire around 34 electric pulses every second. Any fish that swims into the current feels the shock and turns back. The cost to build the system ran into the tens of millions of dollars, and the power needed to run it is so large that engineers had to upgrade the local electrical grid. One barrier was never going to be enough. The United States Army Corps of Engineers has since moved forward with a much larger project at the Brandon Road Lock and Dam in Joliet, Illinois. That single project is expected to cost close to $900 million, and the plan combines electric barriers with underwater sound cannons, bubble walls, and flushing locks. Along the Illinois River, biologists carry out electrofishing surveys every month to monitor how close the population is getting to the barrier. Commercial fishermen have become part of the wall, too. The state of Illinois pays contracted crews to remove carp year-round using a method developed just for this invasion. The technique involves herding fish into shallow areas before pulling them out in massive coordinated nets, and it can bring in tens of thousands of pounds in a single day. Crews remove between 450 and 900 tons of carp every year from inland waters. Even with that scale of removal, reproduction keeps outpacing the catch. More fish enter the system than leave it. Some of the removal methods have also disturbed native fish by blocking their natural migration paths, which means the defense is hurting the very species it is meant to protect. So the wall holds for now. But holding is not winning. While American agencies spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year just to stall the invasion, another country is taking the same species and building an empire out of it. China's 2,000-year head start. In China, the carp is not an invader, it is heritage. Carp farming in China goes back at least to the Han Dynasty, which places the practice at over 2,000 years of continuous aquaculture. Through centuries of farming, these fish became woven into rural life, rice paddies, temple ponds, and integrated farming systems that still operate today. The modern scale of Chinese carp farming is hard to picture until the numbers are laid out. China produces between 17 and 20 million tons of carp every single year. That is more than 60% of all farmed freshwater fish in the world, and it feeds an aquaculture industry valued at over $200 billion. The reason it works in China and fails in America is simple when you look at biology. In China, carp are native to the river systems. They evolved alongside native predators, competed with native species, and settled into a balance over millions of years. There is no invasion because there is no foreign species to invade. The ecosystem already knows how to absorb them. Across the Yangtze River Basin, the Pearl River Basin, and the lakes of northeastern China, carp farms stretch for many kilometers in every direction. Chinese farmers developed a polyculture system that raises 4 species together in the same pond. Silver carp stay in the upper water and eat plankton. Bighead carp swim just below them and eat larger plankton. Grass carp clear out aquatic plants near the middle. Black carp work the bottom and eat snails and shellfish. The same pond produces 4 harvests at once, and each species feeds in its own zone without competing with the others. Under normal conditions, a single hectare of pond can produce between 2 and 5 tons of fish every year. Large cooperatives operate hundreds or thousands of continuous hectares, turning inland water zones into something closer to an outdoor food factory than a farm. The feeding cost is low because carp mostly eat plankton, water plants, and natural nutrients that already grow in the pond. Farmers add bran, grain powder, duckweed, and leftover agricultural waste to speed up growth, and almost none of it requires expensive protein feed from the ocean. All of this scale and history means China can move fish from pond to market faster and cheaper than anyone else on the planet. What happens during that journey is where the next part of the story begins. From pond to plate. Harvest day in a major Chinese carp farm moves fast. Nets slowly close around the pond until the fish concentrate into the center. A single net pull can haul in 5 to 20 tons of live carp in a few hours, which is enough to fill several transport trucks. Large cooperative farms repeat the process across many pond sections, and the annual production in one region can reach several thousand tons. The processing side is where Chinese efficiency really shows. The fish move onto automatic sorting conveyors that separate them by weight and length at a rate of tens of thousands of fish per hour. High-pressure water jets strip away mud and slime from the bodies within minutes. Specialized cutting machines process the fish at high speed while keeping the meat intact. And automated deboning lines pull out the tiny pin bones that used to make carp hard to sell in export markets. The fillets are flash frozen at around 35 to 40 degrees below 0 Celsius, then packed into refrigerated containers at 18 degrees below zero for long-distance transport. Prices stay low because the scale is huge. On China's domestic market, carp usually sells for between $2 and $4 United States dollars per kilogram, which makes it one of the cheapest protein sources available to ordinary families. In export markets across Southeast Asia, Africa, and parts of Eastern Europe, the price climbs based on demand and processing quality. Entire countries now rely on Chinese freshwater fish imports as a stable part of their food supply. On the dinner table, carp is transformed into dishes that carry thousands of years of cooking tradition. In Henan province, sweet and sour carp is fried until the skin turns thin and crispy, then covered in a glossy red sauce made from vinegar, sugar, fried ginger, and garlic. The hot sauce soaks into the soft white meat and creates a mix of crispy, tender, and sour-sweet that people have been eating since the Tang dynasty. In Zhejiang province, the famous West Lake fish is gently poached and served with a mild sweet sour glaze that shows off the natural flavor of the meat. In Sichuan, dubanyu is cooked in a fiery bean paste broth that carries the heat the region is known for. During Lunar New Year, whole carp appear on family tables across the country because the Chinese word for fish sounds like the word for abundance, and the dish is considered a symbol of good fortune. One species, one fish, two completely different futures. And the story of how these two futures split apart is still unfolding in rivers all over the world. The real invasion. The American carp crisis is not happening in isolation. The same species is rewriting ecosystems on at least 3 continents at the same time, and the pattern is almost identical in every case. In Europe, the Danube River Basin and river systems across Central and Eastern Europe have been under pressure for decades. Carp species stir up sediment as they feed, which clouds the water and kills the underwater plants that native fish depend on for shelter and food. In some areas, carp now make up between 70 and 90% of all the freshwater fish in lakes and canals. In Australia, the situation is arguably worse. Asian carp were introduced into the Murray-Darling River Basin decades ago, and they now account for close to 80% of the total fish biomass in many major river sections. The Australian government has studied a national biological control plan that would use a specialized carp virus to reduce the population, although the plan has been delayed because of concerns about what so many dead fish would do to the water supply at the same time. The lesson that comes out of all 3 continents is not really about the fish. These carp did not cross oceans on their own. They did not evolve their way into foreign rivers. Human beings carried them every single time, always with reasonable goals that made sense in the moment. People wanted to clean ponds. People wanted cheaper food. People wanted to solve an algae problem or a crop problem or a water quality problem. The goals were never wrong. The speed was the problem. These decisions were made quickly, with very little thought about what would happen 50 or 100 years later if the fish got loose. When they did get loose, they stopped being tools. They became part of the ecosystem, and they started changing that ecosystem in ways that no engineer and no scientist has figured out how to reverse. Nature did not create this crisis. Human confidence did. The belief that a complex ecosystem can be fixed with one imported species did. 2,000 years of careful balance built China's aquaculture industry. A few rushed decades built the American invasion. So the real question every government and every generation now has to sit with is this. Every time a new species is introduced somewhere in the world today to solve a fast problem, the Mississippi River is watching, the Murray-Darling is watching, and the Danube is watching. Sometimes what needs to change is not the ecosystem at all. It is the way we understand what we are doing when we reach across the planet to move a living thing from one place to another. What do you think about the idea that the same fish can be both a disaster and a treasure, depending on where it swims? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know which part of this story surprised you the most.